The kingdom of Valoria was a place of strict rules, ancient traditions, and whispered power. Alphas led the lands, strong and commanding, while Omegas were cherished for their grace, wisdom, and the bonds they could form. Nobles moved like chess pieces in polished halls, each calculating alliances, marriages, and advantages. And yet, even in this world of glittering crowns and whispered intrigues, one figure stood apart, the Alpha King. He was a man of immense power and authority, yet he had grown weary of the endless politicking of the court. Masks were everywhere, smiles that hid ambition, words that concealed cruelty, and bows that demanded loyalty to masks, not hearts. He longed to see his kingdom as it truly was, without titles or expectations. And so, one night, under the cover of darkness, he left his palace. He disguised himself as a wandering traveler, concealing the golden crown beneath a simple hood and the weight of his alpha strength beneath quiet humility. The next day, he arrived at the grand gathering of Valoria's nobles, a tradition where Omega girls were presented for consideration as mates by the alphas of noble houses. The halls sparkled with crystal chandeliers, golden tapestries, and polished marble floors. Noble Omegas, adorned in silks and gems, stood in carefully chosen groups, each trained in the art of etiquette, charm, and ambition. Every movement, every word, was a carefully crafted display of worth. The king, in his humble disguise, watched from the shadows, observing the interactions with quiet curiosity. He had attended many such gatherings as himself, but never like this. Today, he would learn not from advisors or sycophants, but from his own eyes and heart. As the noble alphas approached the Omega groups, the disguised king stepped forward. He was met with polite smiles, delicate curtsies, and measured words. But as each noble Omega noticed him, something shifted. Some recoiled slightly, sensing the subtle aura of strength beneath his calm demeanor. Others whispered to themselves, distracted by a fleeting unease they could not name. One by one, the noble Omegas rejected him politely, dismissively, or with careful charm. "I am grateful, sir, but my heart is promised elsewhere," one said, curtsying. "I do not seek another match," another replied, her eyes flicking away. The king felt each rejection as a small sting, but he did not falter. Instead, he observed quietly, learning the patterns of courtly desire and ambition. He could feel the loneliness creeping in. Even among crowds, even among the polished smiles and jeweled gowns, there was no connection, no spark of truth. Nobility could charm with words, but they could not see into hearts. Not really. Not him. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corners of the palace, far from the polished halls and golden tapestries, a young maid Omega moved silently. Her name was Leora. She had no noble blood, no jewels or silk, only the plain clothes of her station and the quiet strength of her heart. She had grown up serving in the kitchens, sweeping floors, carrying water, and watching the nobility from a distance. Leora had learned the ways of people, the truth hidden beneath masks. She noticed small details, understood silent gestures, and read hearts in ways that no noble lesson could teach. She had seen the Alpha King in the hall from her vantage point, though she did not yet know his true identity. There was something about him, something different from the nobles. He did not carry the arrogance of a title, nor the desperation of ambition. There was calm in his movements, a quiet strength in his presence, and a gentle melancholy in his eyes. Curiosity drew her closer. She stepped from the shadows, carrying a tray of water and bread, offering it with a respectful bow. "Sir," she said softly, "you look weary. Perhaps you would care for some refreshment." The disguised king looked at her, noting the simplicity of her manner, the lack of pretense, and the sincerity in her voice. No noble had ever spoken to him like this. He accepted the tray with a small nod. "Thank you," he replied, his voice calm but warm. They began to speak, quietly at first, exchanging words about the gathering, the nobles, and the strange dances of courtly life. He asked her simple questions, curious about her thoughts, her dreams, and her observations. She answered honestly, never fearing to speak her mind, never bowing too low, or flattering him unnecessarily. There was a tension between them, subtle and electric. It was not the physical pull of attraction that stirred, but something deeper, the recognition of strength, the meeting of minds, and the slow unfolding of trust. She challenged him with her questions, and he responded not with pride, but with thoughtfulness. "You see things differently from the others," he said finally, his gaze steady. "Most people hide behind what they wish to appear. You do not." Leora hesitated, then looked down at her tray, gathering her courage. "I have no reason to hide," she said quietly. "I have nothing to gain from pretending. Perhaps that is why you see me." The king smiled, a rare and fleeting expression, and felt a warmth he had not felt in years. In a world of masks, here was someone who dared to be real. But the court was not so easily ignored. Whispers began to circulate among the nobles. Who was this maid speaking to the unknown traveler? Why did the Alpha linger near her, listening so attentively? Some laughed quietly at the absurdity. Others frowned with suspicion. The invisible lines of power began to shift, even if no one yet understood why. As evening fell, a sudden shadow fell over the gathering. A cold wind swept through the grand hall, and the flickering torches cast dancing shapes across the walls. Servants whispered of a curse, an old prophecy tied to the royal bloodline. The Alpha King, even in disguise, felt the stir of unease. He sensed danger not as rumor, but as an instinct deep in his bones. No one else seemed to notice the shift, or perhaps they refused to see. Nobles continued their chatter, oblivious to the subtle trembling of the air, the faint whisper of something dark lurking in the corners. Only the king and Leora noticed. Their eyes met across the hall, and for a moment, understanding passed silently between them. "It has begun," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Leora looked at him, a shiver running down her spine. "The shadows," he said simply. "They stir when the heart of a kingdom is unsettled. There is a curse here, old and dangerous, and it seeks more than gold or land. It seeks the hearts of those who lead." Her eyes widened, but she did not step back. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Then we face it together," she said, her tone quiet but unwavering. The disguised king studied her, astonished. No noble Omega had ever offered such loyalty, such courage. And yet here she was, a simple maid, standing not behind him, but beside him. In that instant, he realized that this meeting was no accident. Fate, he thought, had guided her to him. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a distant scream echoed through the palace halls. Nobles gasped, servants scattered, and the grand hall erupted into chaos. The Alpha King instinctively stepped forward, shielding Leora with a strength born of instinct and training. His calm presence steadied her, even as shadows moved unnaturally across the marble floors. The first signs of the curse were undeniable. Alphas across the gathering began to falter, their strength waning, their voices trembling. Panic rippled through the nobles. Yet the disguised king and the Maid Omega were untouched. Their connection, their trust, seemed to shield them from the creeping darkness. "This is only the beginning," the king said, his voice low and firm. "The kingdom is in danger, and we cannot wait for others to act. We must move, and soon." Leora nodded, her mind racing, but her heart steady. She had followed her curiosity to this man, and now that path led into danger. Yet fear did not dominate her. There was purpose in her steps, and courage in her choices. She had learned that true strength was not in titles or jewels, but in facing the shadows together. As they stepped from the hall, moving toward the hidden passages of the castle, a chill wind followed, carrying whispers of forgotten prophecies and ancient power. Outside, the night seemed darker than any they had known, the stars muted by a gathering storm. The king glanced at Leora, noting her resolve. "If the shadows claim us, we face them as equals," he said. She looked up at him, eyes steady, unafraid. "Then, we will face them together," she replied. The first step into the unknown had been taken. The Alpha King, rejected by all noble Omegas, had found an ally, a companion, and perhaps something more in the unlikeliest of hearts, a Maid Omega who dared to see beyond disguise, into the truth of a man and the destiny of a kingdom. But the curse was awakening, ancient and relentless, and the night ahead promised danger, mystery, and tests of courage neither of them could yet imagine. And so, the Alpha King and the Maid Omega began their journey unseen, underestimated, yet intertwined by fate, courage, and the quiet spark of something deeper, something neither title nor crown could define. The night had deepened over Valoria, and a cold mist crept over the castle walls. The grand hall, once filled with laughter and sparkling lights, now echoed with hushed whispers of fear. The curse that had begun to stir was no longer a rumor, it was real. Alphas throughout the gathering had weakened, their strength waning under the unseen force. Panic rippled through the nobles, their carefully practiced composure crumbling. But in a quiet corner of the palace, the disguised Alpha King and the Maid Omega, Leora, moved swiftly. They had avoided the main hall, slipping through hidden corridors and shadowed passageways that only the castle staff knew. Outside, the courtyard stretched like a dark ocean, silvered under the light of a waning moon. The air was thick with unease, but it was also alive with possibility. "This way," the king whispered, leading her toward a narrow gate at the edge of the walls. His hand brushed hers briefly, a subtle gesture, unnoticed by others, but it carried a quiet reassurance. "If the curse has begun, it will spread quickly. We cannot linger." Leora followed, her heart steady despite the chill that brushed her skin. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To the old forest," he replied. "It is said that the source of the curse lies where the kingdom's first alphas walked, where old magic sleeps beneath roots and stone." The forest was dense, ancient, and alive with its own secrets. Shadows moved strangely among the gnarled trees, and the wind carried whispers that seemed almost like words. Leora felt the pull of the forest, a strange mix of fear and awe. She had never ventured this far from the castle, and yet, in the presence of the disguised king, she felt courage she had not known before. As they walked, their conversation deepened. The king, even in disguise, could not help but reveal fragments of himself, not his true title, but his thoughts, his doubts, and the weight of leadership. "Being a ruler," he said quietly, "is not just about strength. It is about knowing that every decision carries lives, hopes, and fears. Sometimes, it is heavier than any armor I wear, and a better." Leora listened, her eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon. "Then perhaps," she said softly, "strength is not only in the body, but in the heart. Those who can see and understand, and still act, are stronger than those who wield swords without thought." He glanced at her, startled by the clarity of her words. Few had ever understood what he carried within, not even his closest advisors. "You see more than you should," he said, half in admiration, half in wonder. She smiled faintly, though the shadows of the forest deepened around them. "I see what is true, not what people pretend," she said. "And there is truth in you, even under this disguise." Their steps carried them deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, and the sense of magic thickened. Strange shapes flickered between trees, shadows that seemed almost alive. Leora's hand found the hilt of a small knife she carried for safety, though she did not speak of fear. The king noticed and nodded approvingly, recognizing her courage and quick thinking. Hours passed, yet the forest seemed endless. And then they came upon a clearing, a place untouched by time. Moonlight spilled across an ancient stone altar, carved with symbols older than the kingdom itself. Here, the air pulsed with unseen energy, and the whispers of magic grew louder, almost intelligible. "This is it," the king said. His voice was low, reverent. "The curse rises from this place, tied to the bloodline of rulers. Only those who face it with courage, wisdom, and trust can survive its trials." Leora stepped forward, examining the carvings. "It is beautiful," she whispered, "and frightening. How do we stop something so old?" He looked at her, his eyes serious yet tinged with admiration. "We do not face it with force alone," he said. "We face it together, and we face it with truth." As they began their examination, the first test of the curse revealed itself. Shadows erupted from the ground, twisting into forms that mirrored the fears of those who looked upon them. For the king, the shadows became visions of failure, his subjects suffering, nobles betraying him, and the kingdom falling into ruin. For Leora, the shadows took shapes of helplessness, fire consuming the castle, friends trapped and powerless, and the weight of a destiny too heavy for her to bear. Yet they stood their ground. Leora's hand found the king's, and together they focused not on fear, but on courage. Their connection, built from trust and understanding, pushed back the shadows. The dark forms shivered and retreated, though not entirely. The curse was strong, and their journey was only beginning. As they rested, the king finally allowed himself to reveal more of his true self. "I am not who you think I am," he said, removing the hood from his head. His hair shone like midnight under the moonlight, and his eyes, sharp and commanding, met hers with intensity. I am the Alpha King." Leora stared, stunned. For a moment, she could only breathe, the weight of revelation pressing on her. But then, she looked into his eyes, searching not for fear or awe, but for truth. I see you," she said quietly. "Not for your crown, not for your strength, but for you, and for the courage you carry within." The king felt a warmth he had not known in years. To be seen so clearly, to be trusted so completely, was a gift far greater than any throne. Yet the danger of the curse remained, looming over them like a storm. Night after night, they faced trials. Shadows that whispered lies, illusions that preyed on their doubts, and tests of loyalty and resolve. Each time, they relied on each other, her quick thinking, his strength, her courage, his experience. Slowly, a bond formed, unspoken but undeniable. A trust deeper than words, a connection that neither time nor danger could break. One evening, as they camped beneath the trees, the king spoke quietly. "Leora, if I am to survive this curse and protect the kingdom, I must trust you fully. Are you willing to trust me as I trust you?" She met his gaze steadily. "I trust you," she said simply, "not because you are a king or an alpha, but because I know you are true, and truth is stronger than any shadow." The king's lips curved in a small, rare smile, a light in the darkness. "Then we move forward, together." But even as they spoke, the forest seemed to respond. Whispers grew louder, shadows lengthened, and a chill, deeper than the night wind, swept through the clearing. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a being older than the forest, cloaked in shadow, eyes glowing faintly red. The curse itself seemed to take shape, a sentinel of the ancient magic. "You dare enter the heart of the curse," the figure said, voice like wind through dead leaves. "Only those worthy may survive, and only one shall lead." The king stepped forward, placing himself between the shadow and Leora. "We will not falter," he said firmly. "Together, we face whatever comes." Leora, without hesitation, moved to his side. "I am with you," she said. Her voice was steady, filled with courage and quiet fire. "We face this together, and we will not fail." For a long moment, the shadow figure regarded them, silence stretching like a river. Then it shifted, flowing into the darkness once more. A warning, or perhaps a test, it was unclear. But the message was undeniable. The trials ahead would grow harder, the dangers more cunning, and their bond would be the only shield strong enough to survive. As they rested that night, the king and Leora sat close, not speaking, simply feeling the presence of the other. Neither needed words. Their connection, forged in courage, trust, and the first sparks of something deeper, was a light in the growing darkness. The next day, they continued their journey through the forest, deeper into the unknown. Every step carried the weight of the curse. Every breath reminded them of the fragile balance between fear and courage, shadow and light. The king's identity, now partially revealed, added both power and risk. And together, they were becoming more than allies. They were a force that the darkness had not anticipated. But the forest was full of secrets. Ancient magic, forgotten paths, and hidden dangers waited. And even as the two moved forward, the king could feel the pull of destiny. The curse was not a simple force. It was alive, aware, and watching. And it would test them, not only as a king and a maid, but as two hearts intertwined in the shadow of an ancient threat. Hook, cliffhanger. As they reached the edge of a blackened river, the shadows in the forest deepened unnaturally. From the mist, a voice whispered their names, promising that only one could survive the next trial. The king and Leora stood together, hand in hand, hearts beating as one, but the next test would demand more than courage. It would demand truth, sacrifice, and a choice that could change everything. The blackened river stretched before them, a mirror of the moon above, dark and endless. Mist rose from its surface, curling like living fingers, and the forest around them seemed to hold its breath. The shadows that had haunted their journey grew denser, more restless, as if sensing that the final test had come. The Alpha King, no longer hiding his identity, stood at the river's edge, his cloak brushing the mist. His eyes, sharp and commanding, reflected both determination and worry. Leora, the maid Omega, stood beside him, her hand in his. Together, they were more than allies. They were a single force of courage, trust, and hope. Yet even they could feel the weight of what lay ahead. "The curse," the king said quietly, "is alive. It watches, it tests, and it feeds on fear. We must face it not with strength alone, but with truth. Only truth will break its hold." Leora nodded, her gaze steady. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes, we do not falter. We trust each other. And that is stronger than any shadow." From the mist, a shape emerged, taller than any man, cloaked in black with eyes like smoldering coals. The air vibrated with the presence of ancient magic. The curse had taken form, a sentinel of the old kingdom, powerful and merciless. "You have come far," it said, its voice like wind through dead leaves. "But only one shall lead. One heart will break, and the other may survive. Who will claim the crown of truth?" The king stepped forward, placing himself between the shadow and Leora. "We are not here to fight each other," he said firmly. "We are here to end the curse. Together. No one stands alone. The shadow hissed. A sound like ice cracking. It surged forward, testing them, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Shapes formed in the mist, visions of fear, failure, and despair. The king saw the kingdom burning, his people crying out, nobles turning against him. Leora saw visions of helplessness, shadows of herself, unable to protect those she cared for. For a moment, the weight was overwhelming. The mist seemed to seep into their hearts, whispering doubt and despair. And yet, they held each other's hands. Their grip was not just physical, it was the anchor of their bond, the tether that kept courage alive in the face of fear. Focus, the king said quietly. Leora's eyes met his. In that gaze, she found strength, reassurance, and truth. We are stronger than their lies, she said, and together, nothing can break us. The shadows shrieked and swirled, but their bond began to push them back. Light shimmered faintly from where their hands met, a soft glow that pierced the mist. The curse recoiled, momentarily stunned by the unity of two hearts, unafraid. But the sentinel was not defeated. With a roar like thunder, it surged again, now targeting their deepest fears. The visions became sharper, more vivid. The king saw betrayal, friends and allies turning against him, his throne slipping from his grasp. Leora saw loss, the kingdom destroyed, people suffering, herself powerless to stop it. The king gritted his teeth. He realized that this was the final trial, not of strength, but of will. He stepped closer to Leora, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Do you believe in us, Leora? Not just me, but us? That together we can survive this? She nodded, her eyes bright. I do. I trust you. And I trust us. Nothing else matters. He drew a deep breath and closed his eyes. For the first time, he let himself be completely vulnerable. The Alpha King, hidden beneath disguise and duty for so long, allowed his true self to shine not as ruler, not as warrior, but as a man seeking connection, love, and truth. The glow from their hands intensified, spreading outward like sunlight through fog. The shadows writhed, screamed, and twisted, but could not touch the bond between them. Their courage, their trust, their honesty, became a shield that no ancient magic could pierce. Then the king opened his eyes and stepped forward. I am who I am, he declared, voice ringing through the forest. I am Alpha, I am king. But I am also a man who has found trust, hope, and love. And I will not let fear rule us. Leora's voice joined his, strong and unwavering. And I am Leora. A maid, yes, but also someone who believes in courage, truth, and hearts that are brave enough to stand together. We are not alone, and we are not afraid. For a long, tense moment, the shadows froze. The mist hung heavy, and the sentinel's glowing eyes bore into them, searching for weakness. But there was none. Not in their hearts, not in their courage. Finally, with a sound like cracking stone, the shadows began to dissipate. The mist lifted, the forest seemed lighter, and the oppressive weight that had pressed down on them vanished. The curse had been broken, not by strength alone, but by unity, honesty, and trust. The king exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. He turned to Leora, gratitude and awe in his eyes. You saved more than me. You saved the kingdom, too. She smiled, tired but radiant. We saved it together. And you saved me, too, from fear, from doubt, from thinking courage was only for the strong. The night air shifted, warmer now, filled with the soft hum of life returning to the forest. Fireflies lit the clearing like tiny stars, and the river reflected the sky with clarity and calm. The ancient magic, once dark and threatening, seemed to sigh and release. "Now," the king said, his hand brushing a loose strand of her hair from her face, "we must return to the kingdom. There will be questions, doubt, and perhaps even fear from those who do not understand what we faced. But together, we can lead them with truth, not only power." Leora nodded. "And together, we can face whatever comes next. I trust you, and I believe in us." As they began the journey back through the forest, the first light of dawn touched the trees, painting the world in gold and silver. Their steps were lighter now, though the trials they had faced remained etched in memory. Every shadow, every test, had strengthened them, not weakened them. When they reached the castle gates, they found the nobles in disarray. Some had feared the worst, others had plotted to claim the throne during the chaos. But the king, fully revealed, stepped forward, his presence commanding yet tempered with humility. Leora, at his side, no longer just a maid but a symbol of courage and truth, gave him strength. "I am your king," he announced, voice carrying through the courtyard. "The curse that threatened us is broken, not by bloodline alone, but by courage, trust, and the bond that cannot be broken. From this day, the kingdom will know that strength is more than power, it is honesty, bravery, and unity." The nobles were stunned. Some bowed, some whispered, and some scowled. But the message was clear. The old ways of fear, manipulation, and rigid hierarchy were no longer enough. The Alpha King and the Maid Omega had proven that true strength came from connection, trust, and heart. Days passed, and the kingdom slowly healed. The Alphas regained their strength, the nobles adjusted to a new order, and the people began to speak of the Maid Omega, who had stood beside the king through darkness. Leora's courage and wisdom became known throughout the lands, and the bond between her and the king grew deeper with each passing day. One evening, as the sun set over the castle towers, the king and Leora walked together along the garden paths. Flowers glowed softly in the twilight, and the air was calm, free of the shadows that had haunted them. "You were amazing," the king said softly. "I could not have done it without you, and now, I realize, my heart has found something I never expected." Leora looked at him, eyes gentle but steady. "And my heart has found something it never knew it needed," she replied. "Trust, courage, and the strength to believe in something greater than myself." He took her hands in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Then we face the future together. Whatever comes, threats, shadows, or challenges, we face it as equals, as partners, and as something more." She smiled, her heart full. "Yes, together." The kingdom celebrated, but whispers of an ancient prophecy lingered, tales that darkness could return, that the bonds of the brave would be tested again. Yet, as the king and Leora stood side by side, hand in hand, they knew that whatever trials awaited, they would face them as one. Courage, trust, and love had defeated the shadows once, and together, they could withstand anything. The Alpha King, once hidden, now ruled openly, not just with power, but with wisdom, courage, and the strength of a heart bound to another. And the Maid Omega, once unseen, now walked beside him as equal, companion, and partner in a destiny that was theirs alone. The night was calm, the stars bright, and the kingdom safe for now. But legends spoke of hearts brave enough to face darkness. And this was the beginning of a story that would be told for generations, a tale of courage, love, and the unbreakable bond between an Alpha King and the Maid Omega who had chosen him.